My name's Tom Ross, and welcome to the Honest Entrepreneur Show, where I'm bringing you tried and tested advice to help your online business without any of the bullshit. Today, I'm going to be sharing my 10 essential traits which I believe every successful and, more importantly, decent entrepreneur should possess. I know, we've all seen these trait lists on YouTube and heard them on iTunes podcasts before, where it's just throwing out generic tips. But I wanted to do something a little bit different for this episode and actually, with each trait, give real life examples of how I've applied it and how I think you can too. I hope that makes it a little bit more actionable and just makes it a bit more relatable as well. So, my first tip would be vision. I think ultimately, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're trying to build something new and big and amazing, you need to have some degree of vision, right? You need to be able to visualize what you are going to bring to the world, bring to the market that could be disruptive or different. You need to think how you're going to over deliver, how you're going to bring more value than other people. You can't simply copy and paste. You can't mimic other people. You can't just duplicate their efforts. You really need to kind of visualize something new and interesting that's actually going to make people care and want to buy. To give you a real life example of how I've done this, I was very systematic doing this when I first started Design Cuts 5.5 years ago. So I had the big vision, but I got very strategic. I sat on a floor and I literally surrounded myself with notes on all of the competitors out there, the whole shape of the marketplace, and then I systematically worked out how to beat them in every single area, from customer service to product value and offering and community and brand. All of these things were thought out. So I had to have the vision to actually break it down systematically and try and outperform every single person existing in the market in all these areas. And this is something really you can apply to your business and your efforts, no matter what market you're in. And you'd be surprised, with a bit of deliberate thought, you can actually take on some big players, because often people are doing a pretty crappy job and they're not really giving due attention to customers. They haven't really thought things out. They've become big and clunky. So you can actually jump on the scene with a bit of just energy, freshness, and vision, and you can be pretty disruptive. Trait number 2 is fortitude. I think it takes immense amounts of fortitude when you're an entrepreneur. You will get big knockbacks. You need to develop a pretty thick skin. This is not a game for people that have a thin skin. I mean, virtually every day as CEO here, I walk into something pretty big going wrong. Most of the time, I don't share this with my team. There's stuff going on behind the scenes, or like one person comes to me with a problem and not everyone knows it, but you are the kind of last defense on this stuff. So my life is walking into problems. My life is walking into stuff that's gone horrendously wrong, or has surprised us or scares us, or whatever it might be. And so the reality of that is you have to learn to embrace that stuff and just move with it, because it is part of the job. I mean, literally every single week, there's been something of like, a big supplier issue or a big shift in the market and the industry, which we couldn't have foreseen, or someone's quitting, or something's come up. Like, there's always something. You got to just learn to roll with the punches. And on more of a macro level, I think you need fortitude when really big stuff comes along. So like when I've been screwed over in business in the past really badly, or when I hospitalized myself, you need to really be able to pull yourself together and kind of battle through it and develop a kind of mental toughness just to get through it, because it is not an easy ride. Trait number 3 is patience and persistence. And I think these are so necessary, because this stuff takes a long time. It's not a sprint, it is definitely a marathon. I've been doing it since I was 12 years old. I've been at this for 18 years and I still feel like I'm only just getting started. You cannot expect to be an overnight success. Overnight successes do not exist. Even the people you think are overnight successes really aren't. You think Justin Bieber was just one day picked up a guitar and was plucked out. And he's an example of, he's regarded as quite an overnight success. He was there grinding and working as a kid for years and years and years. Might not be your favorite example, by the way, but he's one of many. Anyone you look up to, anyone successful, will have been at this for a long time, honing their craft, going through their paces and like going through tests and what life throws at them. No one gets there overnight. Trait number 4 is the ability to work super hard. I have to say, love it or hate it, I touched on hustle culture in episode 1 of this show. You can't escape the fact that it takes serious amounts of hard work. If you really want to build something from scratch, you really want the world to care, you want to disrupt the market, you want to come in, or even if you just want to do what you love and make money from it, you won't get there without hard work. As the saying goes, if it was easy, everyone would do it. Whether you're type A and you want to hustle your face off, which I don't necessarily recommend, or you just need to come to terms with the fact that you probably can't just chip away at this thing and it's magically going to happen. It's going to take real amounts of dedicated hard work, energy, effort, and focus going into it. And you have to really map your expectations to the effort that you're willing to put in. I've seen supposed entrepreneurs who've hired me when I used to be a designer years ago, and they basically said, oh, I've got 2 hours a month to put on this new venture and I think it's going to fly. And that's just completely ludicrous. So you need to really manage your expectations. If you can put every waking hour and your heart and soul into this thing, great. Risk is still stacked against you. It may well not succeed, but definitely you stand more of a chance if you put every moment into it compared to putting 10 minutes a day into it. And that's just the reality. Trait number 5 is empathy. And I think this one is hugely important. I know not every entrepreneur has it. Some entrepreneurs are super ruthless, but I believe particularly in the age we're living in, it's the people who are good and decent entrepreneurs who are ultimately going to win in the long term and really succeed. You need to learn to have empathy for your customers, your suppliers, your business partners, your team. It is such a vital trait to have. To give you a couple of examples of how I try and employ empathy in my own work, I try and do it with my team by managing them in an empathetic and kind way. I'm sure I don't always do a perfect job, but I try my best to be a decent human being with them. And I know so many people have joined us, and you hear the horror stories where, you know, they're not recognized or they're bullied or mistreated, and just the crap you get in virtually every working environment. And it can be a kind of macro level of just actually respecting them and liking them and treating them like decent people. And then the micro things, like there's a running joke here. I always try and say to everyone, great job when they're done for the day, and actually recognize their efforts. I think those things go a very long way, but I think they are shockingly rare in the working world, and that's something which needs to change. I think it's also super important to employ empathy with your customers, because putting yourself in their shoes and trying to really understand who they are, what they value, what they care about, that is massively beneficial when you're building a business. To actually understand what they want, to see the world through their eyes, will let you make great business decisions to ultimately serve them better. Trait number 6 is passion. And I almost didn't put this in because it's such a cliche truism. Everyone's like, you gotta have the passion, right? But it is true, because if you look back at points 1 to 5 so far, you couldn't do that stuff if you didn't have the passion. It's ridiculous. You wouldn't be able to work 100 hours weeks. You wouldn't be able to walk into chaos every day. You wouldn't be able to deal with all the shit and the problems if you didn't truly love it. I think Steve Jobs said something about, you would literally have to be crazy to want to do this because it's so nuts what you put yourself through. So without the passion piece, if you're just doing it for money, I don't believe you're going to be able to sustain that or ultimately succeed in the long term. Trait number 7 is adaptability and speed. It is so vital to move quickly more than ever. I think literally online and in the modern era, stuff changes in 6 months that it might have taken a decade before for those sands to shift. It is moving so constantly. For any designers out there, it's much the same with technology, right? And web design. If you went to Barbados and laid on a beach for 2 years, you'd come back and the whole industry would have moved on without you. It is that rapid. Same thing for business. It is a huge asset to be able to pivot and adapt and move quickly on things. And in terms of giving you real examples, it's everything. We are constantly doing this. We can never rest on our laurels. I constantly have this fear in the back of my mind that the industry is going to move on, a new competitor is going to come along, a new feature, like something's going to come and crush us. That's what I have to live with every single day. And that's what helps drive me to constantly be iterating. And that leads me on to point number 8, running out of fingers here. Point number 8 is a drive for better. For me, I see it so much in what I've done over the years. Like, I'm never happy with the status quo. I always think things need to be moving and improving. And for that reason, I can never just pause and be like, yeah, this is good enough. And being completely honest with you, maybe that's kind of damaging. I'm sure everyone would chill out a bit if we just put our feet up and it's like, yeah, we're good where we are. And maybe that's the answer for some of you. But all I know is that it's in my nature to always want to try and push it. My old consultancy I used to run years ago was called Push Standards. And I think that's a lot of my ethos in life. You got to push the standard. You got to push how far you can actually take things. And to kind of, attach myself to the previous point I just made. I do think things move so quickly that actually it's gone from just being a bit of a type A personality thing to a necessity, because if you don't constantly push forward, then the world's just going to move past you. To give you one example of this is social media content. So I work with our social media manager here, and I will regularly mention the fact that the content will dry up and become staid and boring and dull, even if nothing changes, right? So we put out content, we're super happy with it, it's great, it resonates well. But if we just did the same exact thing for 5 years and never mixed it up, people would invariably become bored. So you constantly need to be paying attention to what works, introduce new things, try new things, and try and push the standard forward. Point number 9 is optimism. And I think this is so essential. Whenever I see someone with a negative, can't do it attitude, I look at them and just think, you could never be an entrepreneur, because it would not work. I know a notable example of a successful entrepreneur is Richard Branson, who internally at Virgin is called Dr. Yes, because he just wants to try everything and say yes to everything. He never focuses on, oh, I can't do it, here's a bunch of issues. He's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. To give you a real example of this, over the years, we don't get many, but like any company, we get the occasional bad customer email. And I always try and look at it as an opportunity where they might hurl abuse at you, but ultimately, when you read between the lines, there's probably a reason behind their email. And so if you look at it from an optimistic perspective, you can think, okay, actually, they've kind of got a point there. So I'm not going to take that to heart. I'm not going to feel down. I'm not going to feel like everything's broken. I'm going to take their feedback, and then I'm going to iterate and improve based on it and actually benefit from it. If you've ever worked with someone, be it a business partner, co-worker, whatever, and they're kind of down and out, like, yeah, like, I don't think it's going to work, and they're pessimistic, it kills productivity, it kills progress, and it just does not fly in the entrepreneurial space. And finally, last but not least, point number 10 is the ability to spin a lot of plates. I've never met an entrepreneur or anyone who's kind of super invested and hardworking who doesn't end up throwing themselves into things and spinning a lot of plates. I feel like every day there's 100 different things happening. And even when you're delegating effectively, you're kind of quite aware of all of them. So people are there, they're autonomous, they're doing their jobs around you in the case of the amazing team here. But I still pretty much know everything which is happening. And in your head, you're trying to spin these plates. You're trying to just keep everything at a level where it should be and push bits forward. And there's the aforementioned threats of other stuff coming in and things changing and unexpected issues coming up. And you've got to kind of deal with all of it simultaneously. And this leaves you spread pretty thin at points. I know particularly with the team, I try and push back a bit more now, but there's been a lot of days where you just hear your name and you feel like your head's like just on a spinner all day. But yeah, I think this is very, very common. And again, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who vouch for this. I think it's particularly relevant to give you a real example of the early days. When you start your thing, you start your company, you invariably have to do everything. You're not going to magic a load of revenue and a team from nowhere. So you will have to do a bunch of stuff. Like I alluded to in the first episode of the show, I was doing basically every job that we now have a team for. And that is true plate spinning. You're jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing. And it's just part and parcel of being an entrepreneur. There's also a thing, my dad mentioned this to me, and I've heard it from a couple of other entrepreneurs, in that you hear everything. And I can definitely vouch for this. So people will kind of chat about things, and even though you're working and you're focused on that, you kind of take it in, partly because you have to and partly because I think it's just ingrained in me. But people will come and bring things up to me and I'll be like, yeah, like I already know what you're talking about because I heard the 3 conversations going on around the office, because I just feel like I have to. And maybe I'm wrong in that. I can hold my hands up. Maybe I'm not delegating enough and not letting go, and I should just shut off from it all. But I think it is a very common thing for entrepreneurs where you just kind of want to feel like you're in control of everything to an extent. Even when you're delegating, even when they're doing a great job and they're autonomous, you're still at the very least aware, even if you're not micromanaging. So I hope these top 10 tips and traits were helpful. I don't know how many of them you see in yourself. Maybe there's some which you kind of recognize you need to work on a little bit. But for me, all 10 are absolutely vital. There's no maybes. There's no nice to haves here. I truly believe you need at least those 10 and probably more to be a successful entrepreneur. If you have all of them, but you lack empathy, or you have all of them, but you're a pessimist, not an optimist, for example, or you got all of them and you're not willing to work hard, I believe the whole thing falls apart and just can't work. So for me, you need 10 out of 10. Maybe comment in the video below how many you think you have out of 10 and what you intend to do about that. Maybe you disagree with me. I never want to preach this stuff as the gospel, but it's my truth. It's what I've experienced, what I've noticed, and I'm trying to gain enough self-awareness to recognize what traits I should be pushing myself to. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. It means the world. Like, honestly, your time and your attention and the fact you're here paying attention to this show and consuming it, I'm hugely humbled, and I hope it continues to bring you value. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks so much for watching this episode. Really appreciate you being here with me. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe right here on YouTube. Remember, tick the little bell icon so that you get proper notifications. I really hope you're enjoying the show. I hope you'll stick around for the upcoming episodes. I really want to keep bringing you as much value as possible. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you guys soon.